A magical forest where fairies live may turn out to be nothing like the fairy tale place we're used to hearing about in legends. These sweet-looking fairies are not friendly creatures at all. Years of imprisonment underground turn them into hateful beings who, when night falls, spend hours watching people, admiring their bodies, their gestures, their expressions, their perfect forms. But what caused the downfall of an entire civilization? Ancient, as old as life itself. How did humans manage to drive the fairies from the surface of the earth? And why did they become prisoners of their own rules? The film The Watchers cautiously gives us part of the answers. But the core of these events happens off-screen. That's normal for this kind of genre. If you, like me, want to uncover the full story of the fairies and piece together a complete picture in your mind, I invite you to watch this video until the very end. My name is Evgeny, and today we're breaking down the film The Watchers. I promise it's going to be interesting. Let's begin. So, I think we need to start with history, with the story of the friendship between humans and fairies, or as they are also called, the Fae folk. We don't know exactly when this alliance began, but humans and fairies lived in harmony for a very long time. Humanity existed and prospered thanks to these leaf-born beings. Fairies could heal any illness, cure the sick, give wise guidance, summon rain, calm storms, and help increase the harvest. Plant seeds would grow instantly in their soil. To humans, they were gods. In return, people taught them crafts, construction, and took care of their gods. At that time, fairies lived beneath the forest canopy, in the shadows of towering trees. Sunlight did not kill them, it only caused discomfort. Their skin dried out quickly and direct rays burned them, leaving painful marks. But as long as they remained in the shade, they were completely safe. Any human could turn to the fairies for help, and the forest dwellers always aided their brothers. Because of this alliance, humanity knew nothing of hunger or disease, but humans were greedy, selfish, and always envied their gods. The fairies, on the other hand, did not share human vices. Wealth and power meant nothing to them. The gifts of nature were enough for a peaceful life. Over time, the Celtic people demanded power from the fairies. The winged gods could not refuse their brothers, and so they began to teach humans magic. This is how sorcerers, witches, and druids came into being. Humanity gained a power that once belonged only to the gods, and that was the first mistake. The second mistake was knowledge. The fairies revealed all the secrets of their symbols and explained the meaning of the runes to humans. Each symbol could grant a person what they desired. Some brought prosperity, luck, and health. Others made the land fertile. Certain runes opened new boundaries of understanding and knowledge. Humans no longer needed the forest folk, but even that was not the true cause of the war. After hundreds of years of prosperity, a Celtic king desired one of the fairies. From their union, a half-blood child was born. That became the first real step toward war. You see, fairies admired human bodies. They were symmetrical, balanced, perfectly formed. With fairies, everything was the opposite. Their appearance was often grotesque. Some had only one nostril or a single eye. Others had no nose at all. Some had fangs protruding from their mouths. Others had webbed arms and legs, long thin limbs, bones jutting out in every direction. In places, their skin was translucent, so you could see the ribs beneath it. Some had breasts so long they had to throw them over their backs. That is why fairies love to imitate humans, to copy their faces. It went so far that they began wearing clothes to hide the flaws of their bodies. The hair on the fairies' heads grew in uneven clumps, and the back of their heads was always bald. That is why they wore hats. Fairies did not envy humans, because they were incapable of that feeling. The winged folk admired them, but the first half-bloods changed everything. Half human, half fairy. They took the best from both sides. Like fairies, they could fly. They were immortal, powerful, and able to shapeshift into humans. No one could tell a fairy from a human anymore. Sunlight no longer caused them pain. Even silver did not burn their flesh. A perfect species. But the half-bloods also inherited all the flaws of humanity. Hatred, love, anger, emotions that fairies had never known. Half-blood children were raised by the fairies, but fairies were incapable of giving them love. They watched how humans lived, how people loved their children, and they began to envy them. and that envy played a crucial role in the war that was yet to come. The half-bloods began killing children and copying them. They infiltrated human families, taking the place of sons and daughters. Such fairies were called changelings. Their transformations were flawless. No one could tell the original from the copy. The half-bloods became a threat to humanity. They could imitate courtiers, generals, kings, and queens. And so the Celtic ruler made the decision to rid the world of the fairies. While it was still within his power, sorcerers and druids conspired with the half-bloods, persuading them to betray the fairies. In return, they promised them freedom and wealth. At the edge of the forest, humans dug a tomb deep into the ground. They did not know how to kill the fairies, but they knew how to take away their freedom. Early in the morning, as the sun rose over the horizon, people set the forest on fire. The fairies did not know what to do. The druids' magical fire could not be extinguished by rain. Massive trees burned like kindling. The speed of the fire rivaled the wind itself. That was when the half-bloods played their part. They led the fairies to what they claimed was a safe place, a vast pit. The fairies were trusting, and they had no other way out. When all the winged creatures descended into the pit, humans sealed the exit with a massive stone door. The sorcerer sealed the tomb and placed a curse upon the fairies. Everyone who remained outside, mostly half-bloods, was hunted down and killed by humans. Yes, the half-bloods are immortal. They cannot die of old age, but arrows and swords can tear their flesh apart. They are just as vulnerable as humans. That is why some of the changelings were forced to flee and hide. How many of them existed was unknown, just as no one knew how long the fairies remained underground. But after years of imprisonment, they managed to dig a path back to the surface. When the fairies emerged, they realized they had lost their wings. They had lost all their magical abilities, and sunlight now burned their bodies. They could no longer hide in the shadows of trees as they once had. The pit and the catacombs became their home, and the cursed forest gave them no way to escape. Mighty gods turned into beasts, creatures that could only kill and dreamed of revenge. This is the central and foundational story of the war between fairies and humans, a conflict that forms one of the main narrative threads of the film The Watchers. The second storyline, of course, is connected to Professor Rory Kilmartin. We know almost nothing about how he managed to build the bunker, find a way out of the forest, or capture and train the half-blood Ain Roktan. That's why I suggest we explore the professor's story. It reveals many hidden truths. I won't go through Kilmartin's entire biography, only the facts that are directly connected to the film. The professor had long been fascinated by Irish folklore. He often studied stories about forests inhabited by leprechauns, banshees, and fairies. One day, he came across a document describing strange events that took place in the 13th century. These were diary entries written by a blacksmith, connected to the arrival of the Norman army, which came to Ireland at the beginning of the 13th century. Their scouting unit was sent into a forest where, according to local residents, darkness itself was hiding. No one entered that forest because going there meant certain death. A detachment of 100 warriors was ordered to investigate and clear the forest of partisans, but by morning only 9 soldiers returned. They claimed that when night fell, their horses panicked and began to flee in terror. The ground shook and creatures emerged from the shadows of the forest. The soldiers fought them, but the creatures could not be defeated. Then one of the soldiers, along with his companions, began to run, fleeing through the screams of dying men. He ran for so long that it felt like an eternity had passed. But the forest did not end, not until his legs plunged into water. It was a river. They stripped off their armor and threw themselves into the current. That was how those soldiers survived. All of them, all his friends, were later executed for cowardice. He told this story to a blacksmith, and the blacksmith recorded everything in his diary. This account deeply inspired Kilmartin, and he began to study everything connected to the mysterious forest. Later, he discovered even older manuscripts that described the war between fairies and humans. There, he learned about shapeshifters and half-bloods. The documents were dated to the 5th and 6th centuries. The manuscript stated that at the king's request, the wizard Merlin was summoned to a settlement located near the forest. He created a protective circle along the forest's border, which could only be opened with a runic key. As a result, the villagers could not enter the forest where the fairies lived. This runic password was written down in the manuscript, and that is how Kilmartin obtained the key. He already had approximate coordinates of the mysterious forest. The film shows us these ancient runes as well. When Mina drives up to the forest boundary, her phone breaks. On the phone screen, you can see that very runic key. Later, the runes appear on the car's audio system. Apparently, communication devices and radio equipment are able to pick up a magical signal and reproduce the runes on their screens. Most likely, after hundreds of years, the protection weakened and people began to enter the forest, especially those who had lost all hope. This was not an isolated case. A notice board was shown by the roadside. Most of the postings were about missing people, the unfortunate victims of that ancient war. And it's no coincidence that people avoid this forest and call it a resting place for suicides. Let's return to the professor and his scientific expedition. After the death of his wife, Madeline, an idea was born in his mind to bring his loved one back. You could say he lost his sanity. Kilmartin designed a project to build a bunker with an observation room. Everything had to be assembled quickly, like a massive construction set. The professor believed the hardest part would be finding workers, but on the very first day of the advertisement, more than 20 people responded. All because he promised high wages. He knew that in the end, he wouldn't have to pay anyone. The construction process itself is not described anywhere, neither in the novel nor in the film's script. Only through brief footage do we learn that it took a long time, and that each night Kilmartin left the workers outside while he hid inside the bunker. But it's not entirely clear what he did before the bunker even existed. It's possible that the professor left the workers behind, gave them instructions, and then escaped by boat along the river while it was still daylight. That would only have been possible in summer, when the long days allowed him to leave the forest in time. There was another strange detail. Kilmartin noticed that at the construction site, the fairies left nothing behind from the workers. There were no bones, no clothes, no personal belongings. But while wandering through the forest later on, he discovered a hidden cache of silver jewelry. Silver burned the fairies' skin. Yet someone had brought rings, chains, bracelets, and pendants to the forest's edge. At each location where the jewelry was found, he placed markers, naming each one a point of no return. He took all the silver back with him into the bunker. Later, it would prove useful. The professor also installed 9 cameras in the forest to observe the fairies. He hid them carefully, but it didn't work. At night, the fairies found the cameras, even the ones that were extremely well concealed. Inside hollow trees, beneath piles of leaves, he couldn't understand how they were discovering them. Later, while setting up yet another camera, he noticed a raven watching him. That's when he realized the fairies were controlling the birds. They could not leave their burrows during the day, but they used ravens instead, controlling them in order to see and observe the professor in daylight. As soon as night fell, the control was broken, and the birds immediately left the forest. All other animals avoided the territory where the fairies lived. They sensed danger and stayed away. But the ravens were puppets. Every morning they returned again and again, as if acting against their own will. That is how the fairies learned everything about Kilmartin's actions during the day. When the sun went down, he turned on a television playing a recorded dating show called Love Den right in front of the massive glass wall. Every night, the fairies gathered there. They couldn't take their eyes off the screen. They studied humans. They tried to copy their bodies. They constantly mimicked and imitated the behavior of the people on the show. But they always made mistakes. The wrong placement of the eyes, incorrect proportions, the wrong number of fingers. That is why, when Mina descends into the burrow, we see that the fairy has 6 fingers. She couldn't maintain the correct proportions. All of them make mistakes, but they learn quickly. Over time, the professor's observations and research reached a dead end. But then something extraordinary happened. One day, he noticed a red-haired girl walking through the forest during the daytime. This shapeshifter was different from the others. She was not aggressive and moved calmly through the forest in daylight. Sunlight did not harm her. This was a chance for Kilmartin. he had found a half-blood. She wandered through the forest, studying nature, collecting stones and acorns. That was when the professor decided to conduct an experiment. Near the observation room, he left a silver pendant. The girl came during the day and immediately picked up the gift. The silver did not burn her skin, and on the fairy's face, he saw joy. Kilmartin quickly realized that she was the one leaving the silver jewelry along the forest's edge. Most likely, the fairies forbade her from bringing silver into the burrows, since they could not tolerate that metal. So she hid it in places the fairies never entered. That was when he decided to go even further. The professor devised a plan to lure the girl into the bunker, where a trap had already been prepared. A steel cage. He scattered all the silver throughout the forest. During the day, as always, the girl appeared and began collecting the jewelry. She followed the trail, delighting in every new find. She never noticed the professor's trick. She descended into the bunker and stepped into the cage. That was how Kilmartin managed to capture a fairy. Even in the film, we can see that Madeleine still loves silver jewelry. There are rings on every one of her fingers, bracelets, chains, and pendants. All of these items once belonged to the workers who were killed by the fairies. The training process itself is never described anywhere. We don't know exactly what happened, but it seems the professor was partially successful in awakening human behavioral traits in Madeleine. Being a half-blood, she perfectly copied the professor's wife from a photograph. In that form, he felt love for her, and for a long time he was able to speak with the fairy. A fragile sense of trust formed between them. What happened to Madeleine after Kilmartin's death, we can only guess. One thing is clear, she no longer killed, she accepted everyone who entered the forest. You could even say she saved them. She created rules and helped them in every possible way. And of course, she hid her secret. At Point of No Return 134, we can see the professor's skeleton and skull. It was Madeleine who created that scarecrow in the shape of a fairy. Perhaps she even missed Kilmartin. He showed her a different kind of life. Naturally, these stories give us many answers, but some smaller details are described much more clearly in the novel. For example, how the people survived, where they got water, and what they ate besides ravens. In fact, not far from their shelter, there was a spring, a stream that never dried up. There was always enough water. Madeleine also knew a great deal about mushrooms. The forest was covered with many different kinds of fungi, along with large amounts of nuts and other fruits. Ravens were caught in traps quite often. Sometimes, after sunset, the birds rushed to leave the forest so desperately that in the chaos they crashed into trees and died. In the morning, the captives collected the dead ravens. The only thing people feared, aside from the fairies themselves, was the cold. The arrival of winter was always harsh. Constant rain and snow made the stored firewood damp, and it became difficult to start a fire. Also, when Mina descends into the burrow, we can see ancient Celtic symbols carved into the walls. The first labyrinth symbol represents the path leading into the depths of your spirit. In the upper right, we see the Tree of Life, a symbol of the center of the entire universe. When a Celtic tribe cleared land for a future settlement, they always left a great tree standing at the center, the Tree of Life. It symbolized the tribe's unity and protection. We also see Ogham markings, an ancient Celtic writing system. At the top, there is the word Earth. Along the sides, you can notice runes. The first one, Fehu, represents wealth, abundance, and material prosperity. It marks the beginning of something new. Just below it is the rune Win, which was considered a wish granter because it contains the potential power of fulfillment and realization. Win also represents happiness, harmony of the home, family, and well-being. On the left, there is another rune, Ingus. It was associated with increasing fertility and attracting positive energy into life, specifically human life, but not the lives of fairies. At the center, we see a triskelion, 3 interwoven spirals symbolizing the movement of the sun, endless development, and the support of the forces of nature. I couldn't decipher the other inscriptions and symbols, including the text carved around the massive stone door. If any of you are experts in this, I'd be glad to know what it says. Share your interpretation in the comments. I'll be waiting. Naturally, I noticed a lot of similarities between the series From and the film The Watchers. The main antagonists, the monsters, live underground, in catacombs. Scandinavian runes appear both in the series and in the film. The monsters only come out to hunt at night. The shared setting is a forest. People are trying to survive. And of course, the ravens. They are one of the key elements of the series From. But in The Watchers, we finally learn exactly why and how the fairies use them. Most likely, these similarities are just coincidences, since both projects draw heavily from Scandinavian myths and folklore. Still, I started thinking, what if the monsters in From also copy the people they kill? What if they are fairies too, even tooth fairies? Remember that moment with the smile. Among his personal belongings, they found the tooth of the grandmother he killed on the bus. One way or another, I really enjoyed The Watchers. As for the novel, I barely managed to finish it. It's quite a dull book. The film, however, is executed very well, and Mina's story, along with the other changes, fits perfectly into the overall narrative. Of course, more time could have been devoted to the backstory, but then I would have had less work to do, and this video wouldn't have turned out nearly as complete.